This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 11, Episode 8. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. Today is Wednesday, what is it, March 12th, 2025.
Yes, sir.
As of recording of this episode, I am your host, Riley Bowman, joined by co-host Jacob Paulsen.
Yes, and Riley is the guy who failed today to achieve his goal of an 8-minute mile. Riley runs a lot,
yeah.
But you specifically just, I don't know, maybe even out of the blue said, today I'm going to see if I can do a mile in under 8 minutes, and you just fell short.
Yeah. There you go. Just fell short.
Next time.
I am not the fastest runner, never have been, but I've been getting a little bit better at it.
I'm sure I could not run an 8-minute mile.
Yeah.
Today, right now.
I would say long term, I'd love to get to being in the sixes. I don't know, but I mean, one can hope, right?
Yeah. Well, my best mile.
I definitely think it's possible, but
in my prime, I ran a 4:32. Do I get any credit for that?
Dude, that's insane.
This is what I did. I was on the track team. I was a runner.
4:32 miles.
4:32.
Yeah.
I dropped out. I cheated too. That was a huge elevation drop. I lived at about 6,400 feet, and I ran that 4:32 at about 4,400 feet. So, yeah, oxygen was good.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel pretty good about doing what I can do at my age at basically mile high,
We are just getting older.
Well, as I guess you just gave me your guy who, Jacob's the guy who used to run cross country.
Cross country and track. It's true. I did the run thing.
I pretty regularly run a 5K. I mean, about once a week, I usually do a 5K. I mean, I know there's some of you out there like, I run, that's rookie numbers or whatever, but I feel pretty good, putting in a 5K dang near every week, and I could do it in about 28, 29 minutes.
It is my goal to do a 5K 2 or 3 times a week, but it has been many months since I output that. I'm kind of rebuilding back now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, welcome to today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about gear trends, specifically things like red dots, lights, malfunctions, and things that we've noticed in recent classes. Specifically, we're going to share some data from a recent pistol intelligence class that I taught that Jacob assisted and came to as well. Jacob's the one who really actually tracked that stuff. I don't normally have even the brain resources at all to even be thinking as I'm trying to focus on teaching and delivering my curriculum to, hey, what are these students using? I kind of anecdotally have a sense. I see things, I pay attention generally, but not like writing it down and tracking it. So we're going to share some of that from a recent class, and also that I think that'll bring up other things we've noticed over the recent history, the last year or two or whatever, in terms of gear trends, conferences, and other events we've been to. That of course, the Guardian Conference, we see a lot of different gear show up at the Guardian Conference each year. So, what are some of the lessons and takeaways from the current, I guess, gear choices? I mean, there's some trends. Maybe there's some what's the word? There's trend, but there's also not gimmick, but you know what I mean, like fads.
Ooh, I like fads.
I don't know.
Trends, fads, and gimmicks. Oh my.
Yeah, right. So we'll talk about some of that and kind of our thoughts and takeaways and kind of where we think the industry is at, where people are at. Today's episode sponsored and brought to you by the Pistol Intelligence course, online Pistol Intelligence course that we filmed a couple years ago. I should say, really, we didn't film directly, but thank you to John Correa and his crew at Active Self-Protection. Filmed a course that I taught in Arizona, where most of the Active Self-Protection crew was involved. So that got filmed, and then we did some further editing to it and things, and realized actually at one point there was a section, a kind of an important drill that was missed, just nature of running out of storage on memory cards or whatever when it was originally filmed. And so we went to the range and made sure that was filmed so that critical drill is included in our version of the Pistol Intelligence course, available at concealedcarry.com/PIQ course. Jacob, you've been through the course, you've observed me teaching it a time or two. Kind of like, what do you what would you tell somebody, like, why should they, at the very least, view and go through the online pistol intelligence course?
Well, this is not a tactics course. This is a pistol performance course. This is about increasing your ability to manipulate the tool efficiently and effectively. And I think my experience, I guess there's two things that I immediately think about when I think about the PIQ curriculum. The first is kind of a new approach to things that are probably part of most curriculums. Things like grip and curriculums. Is that plural, right? Curricula.
Is
There you go. So yes, pretend I said curricula like a really intelligent person.
Yeah, there you go.
So things like grip and stance and recoil management, things looking at things that are part of any pistol performance or even traditional defensive pistol curriculum, and saying what's the more efficient way to think about this and approach this and learn it and teach it. But then the second major thing I think about when I think about PIQ is that it's about vision. It's about seeing things and kind of unlocking the power to be able to send the shot and know where it's going to go before it leaves the gun. And that's like this foundational thing that has all these ripple effects, all of these kind of byproduct things. Like I think that being able to see that also allows you to be able to shoot faster. It allows you to handle recoil more efficiently. I think it even impacts the way you grip the gun, because if you're tracking the sights throughout the entire process, that it changes for you what's important relative to the consistency at which the gun moves. So anyway, lots of things like that.
It's interesting to hear your perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. I hope that that's also of interest to some of you watching or listening. My big thing is I want people to be able to see better so they can shoot better. I think that that's just really critical, that if we can see what's happening between us, target, and gun, then we can shoot better.
Yeah.
So there you go. Check it out, concealedcarry.com/PIQ course to check out and sign up for, or I guess purchase the pistol intelligence course. You can also view it completely as included membership if you are a Guardian Nation member. So you can also join Guardian Nation if you'd prefer that instead, and get full access to our whole video training library at Guardian University. Today's class episode is also sponsored by KSG Armory. Specifically, we're highlighting today the Revere holster, which is a light bearing holster. It's well, I mean, think about it. Paul Revere, right? What was the famous
one of land, two if by sea.
Two if by sea, right? Famous Paul Revere's ride, Midnight Ride, right? And so, when we were thinking about names for products of holsters at KSG Armory, it was like, hey, if it's a light bearing holster, we're going to call it the Revere, because all the holster names have a tie-in somewhere to essentially, like,
the American Revolution,
yeah, kind of time frame. And so there you go. That's the Revere holster. If you'd like to, or if you're in need of a light bearing holster, that we can't unfortunately currently support all models of guns with all models of lights, but we have many of the most popular ones available that are light bearing. So, I mean, a really popular one is like the Glock 43X48 with a TLR7 sub, or a P365 or P365X macro with a TLR7 sub light. Those are super popular, it seems, with the light bearing option. And so those are certainly available as a Revere holster from KSG Armory. Check out ksgarmory.com/Revere, REVERE, if you need help with spelling Revere.
There you go. That's how you spell it.
So let's jump into today's topic.
Yeah. So I think my first disclaimer, I think, that needs to be made is that, I documented, and I got this idea from John Correa. We already mentioned him once this episode. So, but he does this a lot. When he comes back from a class on Facebook, he posts all the guns that he saw on the line in his class.
Right.
And so I just thought I'm going to take this a step further. The other organization that does this really well is A Girl and a Gun. So every year, A Girl and a Gun puts out a report after their national conference of all the gear that's used by all the ladies at that event.
Right.
And theirs is much more detailed. I mean, they'll like what brand of pants they're wearing, I mean, that kind of level of detail.
Yeah,
so it's like
Pro, iPro.
the whole thing. So I thought I would try and document some of that at this particular class you had in Spokane. There were basically 19 shooters on the line. You had 18 students plus the host who was jumping in and out off the line at different points. So I, and this is not a negative reflection on anybody. Like, no one's in trouble here. Like, it's all good. But I think that the first disclaimer I wanted to make is that people don't always bring the same gear to class that they would carry with. So some people do. Some people certainly do say, "Hey, this is my EDC loadout. This is the gun I carry each day, and this is the holster, and so this is what I'm going to take to class and use." But there's plenty of things at the class that clearly that was not what they are running on an average day.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, it is not uncommon. I've seen this many times where a student shows up to class and they are showing up with something they've never really trained with before. And I understand why some would do that. It's like, hey, there's this opportunity. I'm going to expend 6, 7, 800 rounds over 2 days. It's a class, so it's intended to be a learning opportunity. Well, I mean, you can certainly learn about that new gear choice that you are showing up to the class with. Uh, and some do that successfully, but quite often it's unsuccessful for students. And what I mean by that is it ends up being a struggle, kind of the struggle bus of, well, gun's not quite running right, or the ammo is not running right, or I'm having an issue with the optic, or I've never used an optic before at all, and now I'm doing it for the first time ever. And so, and I'm not here to judge anybody for that, because certainly, like, you're welcome to use whatever you want to use. It's America. I even get questions from students, sometimes even just the days leading up to the class of, well, should I bring more of my competition setup, or a concealment setup, or a duty gear kind of setup, or whatever. And I'm always like, this class is not specific to a certain type of gear or shooting style necessarily. It's just, I want to teach you how to shoot better, because that benefits. And part of the reason, I mean, I'll be honest, one, I enjoy teaching people how to shoot better, and to teach them how to do that from a somewhat of a unique perspective in the way that curriculum is delivered, but also because it's applicable to no matter who you are. If I taught just purely a tactics oriented course, then the competition folks don't want to show up. If I taught a purely competition oriented class, then the tactical folks don't want to show up,
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of why the class is the way it is.
I think too, we have to, like, if you're listening to this and you maybe have a class coming up, I think there's a commonality. There's a couple commonalities that I see, at the Guardian Conference, at classes that I teach, that you teach. One of those is sort of like the class justifies the purchase. I just signed up for this class. This justifies me going and buying some new gear.
Yeah.
So, hey, as long as I'm going to take a new class, I'm going to get a new gun. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I just think that's commonality. Another thing I'll see is the opposite. Like, I bought new gear, so I'm going to go sign up for a class so I can kind of put that gear through it.
Yeah.
And we see this a lot with optics these days. I've been wanting to switch to an optic, to a red dot, but I wanted to take a class with it. So I signed up for a class, and then I went and got the dot, put it on the pistol, and I'm going to go take that class and work out the kinks with my dot. So my point is, there's some, like, really legitimate reasons why people might show up with gear that is completely untested and unproven to them, for them, they've never used before. We did have, though, there was a student on your line who was running her EDC gun and her EDC holster, a KSG holster, as it were. I think it was a P365, if I'm not mistaken. It was P365 XL. So, that, and she made it very clear, like, this is what I carry. This is how I carry it. This is what I'm running. And she did that for 2 days, straight through. So,
did very well with it.
And she did very well. I'm at a point in my life where I kind of know why I'm doing this, and that's a lot about this too. Is this sort of this purpose-driven thing? And so I do this because I want to be able to shoot bad guys if they try and hurt me and my family. So, like, last year, I took a 3-day, 4-day. I was at S12. I guess I was not a student in that one. But when I go to trainings like S12 or your PIQ class, whatever I think I might be a student in these days, I show up like this. The only thing I really change is I'll throw a spare mag or two on, and I might, one in a mag pouch and one in a pocket, and that's really it. And that's like, here I am, like, take me as I am. But that's because that's my objective. That's my purpose. We had a lot of guys at this Spokane class, kind of this group of dudes that looked like they're all buddies, who showed up in their battle rattle. I mean, they were not wearing plate carriers, but drop leg duty holsters, that looked pretty serious. And so that's not their carry gear, but their objective and for that class might have been, hey, I want to optimize my ability to. In fact, these guys were quite keen on your PIQ standards. They know they're going to be tested. They know that there's going to be some results, some data. So they maybe choose gear that optimizes their ability to score well.
Sure, which is fine. I simply don't care.
The point is,
things, but
it's not, as we go through this, it may not be atypical of concealed carry setups.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just, on this topic where we sort of started this conversation today, I'll say two things. One, I think that there is something to be said for, this is advice, okay? And some of you watching, like maybe, I mean, some of you or listening, when's the last time you took a 1 day or 2 day, like a pretty involved training course? Maybe never. Maybe you're newer to all this, or you just have never gotten around to it. I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to find a reputable instructor or training program or class and go and do it. And if that is something you've done before, do it again, because there's great value to be had. I mean, some of my most significant growth as a shooter came because I went and took some classes with different instructors to see and learn different things and perspectives. And it was super helpful to me and informative to me to come away with different takeaways that I could then implement in my own practice and then see huge gains in my personal growth. So my advice is, the first thing is I think it is a pretty good idea to show up to a class. I should say this: if your goal is to learn the most that you can learn from a class or instructor, show up with the gear that you most often train or shoot with.
That you're most comfortable with.
Yep. So that's the key. If you want to get the most out of that class, then do what you do the most of. So not a new gun, not a new holster setup or a different way or whatever. If you are looking to test something else and also learn along the process, so you want to test, like maybe you spend most of your time at the range training with a battle belt, as they call them, but yet you are carrying concealed most of the time in terms of a practical sense. Okay, maybe the class is a good opportunity for you to actually show up and see how you can do, from a concealment draw with using concealment gear with maybe a different gun, a smaller gun, whatever. Or maybe you want to test different equipment and see how it does, sort of like a torture test of sorts over the 2 days or whatever of a course. That's fine. But the fact is that you are testing or discovering or learning something different or in addition to what you're also there to learn in the class. So if you want to maximize learning in the class, then show up with whatever you are most comfortable with. That's the advice.
Yeah, I'll add just this, that it's okay to bring multiple loadouts and change them in the class, whether it's a 1-day class or a 2-day class. You can say, hey, it's the morning of day 1, I'm going to run with this gear, see how I feel about it. And then if it's driving me crazy or I feel like it's limiting my ability to learn, then I'm going to dump that gear and go back to this other thing I'm more comfortable with. Whatever the thing is, it's okay to switch. And we saw that. We saw, I'm thinking at least one of your students in the Spokane class swapped out guns at least twice.
I've had plenty of students over the years that have, done concealment on day 1 and more of a duty setup or battle belt setup on day 2. I actually make a point as an instructor. I'll typically teach day 1 from concealment and then day 2 from an open carry setup of some kind. It might be my competition rig, or it might be like this class, the Spokane class. I actually used both a sort of a battle belt with a duty holster as well as a competition holster with that setup. But I think most of day 1 from concealment. And then I also make a point to demonstrate and use different guns as well as iron sight and red dot equipped guns. Just as an instructor, I want to be able to demonstrate things in different ways, using different setups, different gear. Part of that is to be able to speak a little bit more to and sort of help others that are in the class that maybe have different setups than other people, to kind of like help them see like, hey, it's cool, your setup, you're still running irons, as John Correa calls it, Amish, gun Amish folks still using iron sights on guns, kind of thing. That's okay. I usually do some demos with iron sights. I just try to mix it up so that you can kind of see that no matter the gear that you are using, shooting is still shooting. And that's really kind of a key component of my class. All right, so let's get into some statistics.
Okay, so let's start with the guns.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go through 19 guns here, and I'll just say them out loud. So, Shadow Systems, a P365 XL, a Glock, a P365, another Glock, an M&P, a Glock, another Shadow Systems, Staccato, an M&P, a P320, a Prodigy, an HK, a Glock, a Glock, a Glock, and an HK.
I like how you didn't, like specifically list. It was a Glock 19 or 17.
A Glock be a Glock, man. Yeah, it's some of these have some aftermarket stuff on them too. So we're not, Glock with whatever slide with whatever, and we'll get into some dots and lights too. But I mean, basically, these Glocks are Glocks for me.
Okay.
19, 17, 19X. I think those are what we're really seeing. So a lot of, definitely Glock is winning here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 19 guns are a Glock on this in this particular class. Shadow Systems was impressive of its turnout.
Yeah,
3 of them.
This was probably the most I think I've seen concentration-wise in a class.
Yeah, 3 Shadow Systems was very remarkable to me.
Yep.
2 365s.
That's actually about half. If you think about it, because the Shadow Systems is basically a Glock
sure.
wannabe,
So now we have
Glock
10 out of
copy.
19. Yeah.
Sorry, Shadow Systems. I'm not trying to offend anybody by saying a Glock wannabe, but
I'm all for Glock wannabes.
So about half of the guns are essentially Glocks,
and
then the rest is kind of a mix of
2 HKs, 2 365s, a P320, a Staccato, a Prodigy, 2 M&Ps.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And one of those M&Ps was a duty gun. I mean, that's like that person's got a badge, and that's their duty gun.
Yep. And that was iron-sighted, if I recall.
Yes, that one is iron-sighted.
Yeah.
Both the M&Ps were running irons.
Yeah.
And they were both badged people.
Yeah. So they were running, essentially they're, I don't know if it's issued or at least it's department approved gear. So, whether, an optic is even an option for that particular agency or department, I don't even know. I didn't even ask, but that's what they were running. But by and large, so we talk about the gun types or gun brands / models. How many, though, were running optics versus irons?
A lot of optics, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Optics. So you count how many optics. I'm going to name the optics. All right. So I'll also say irons, but you just skip the irons. So irons, Trijicon, Romeo, Holosun, Trijicon, irons, Holosun, irons, Trijicon, Holosun, an unnamed red dot. I'm not sure what that one was. A Holosun and a Holosun and a Holosun. So there are 3 irons in there?
Yeah. Oh, I counted, I think, 15 optics, but I might have been off by one.
Yeah, so 3 or 4 irons, and then a whole bunch of dots. So a ton of stinking dots, and clearly
Holosun is
a couple of Trijicon RMRs and one that I did not identify. Like probably I looked at it and I couldn't tell, so it was kind of an unusual thing for me. And then I just didn't get around to asking that person what it was.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I could remember what that was. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's probably a Holosun. But anyway, so a lot of stinking Holosuns. Holosun's extraordinarily dominant on these guns by far.
Why do you think that is?
I think that certainly there's we care about good gear, but Holosun has kind of created its niche in this kind of space between acceptable in terms of cost, but also acceptable in terms of quality. So I think people feel like, hey, if you want the top tier, if you want to go spend the money and get stuff that's a little bit more proven, you could. But if you're looking for a budget-friendly thing that has an acceptable level of quality, Holosun has that brand, has that reputation. I'm running a Holosun on my gun right now.
Same.
I have a Swamp Fox on my my other VP9. but I would call it comparable in perceived value to me. So yeah, I think that there's certainly going to be some people out there like, I want the best. I want the thing that the dudes are running in the military, or that is battle tested in combat. And so yeah, you're going to see some Trigicons, you're going to see some aim points, you're going to see some things like that for those people. But by and large, I think that in the consumer group that we're running around with, which is a bunch of just normal Joes, Holosun has an acceptable level of quality, but is more affordable than a lot of that other stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's a solid. I mean, there's enough data now to suggest that it's pretty reliable of an optic. And I've been running Holosuns for a number of years now as well. I actually have not had any issues with any of my Holosun optics yet. I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't happen, but I haven't had any that have gone down or quit working or anything like that. I've swapped out some batteries, but that's about it. So like that's pretty impressive, to have a pretty good track record and still be pretty affordably priced,
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because in our industry we tend to be a little bit more patriotic of a people, and Holosuns are made in China. And despite that, they tend to be more successful than other brands that come out of China. And I think it's mostly because they've done a good job on the quality side.
They also have a pretty significant U.S. based operation.
Oh, sure.
Employees.
Yeah. When we go to their booth, it's a bunch of Americans that we're talking to, whereas there are plenty of other Chinese manufactured products where you show up at the booth and you're looking for somebody who speaks English.
Yep.
So yes, that's a valid point. They have a big U.S. operation. They understand the U.S. consumer pretty well.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, a lot of their employees take what they do very seriously. They're also shooters. They also take classes. Some of their folks over there I know have spent a considerable amount of time on the range in classes with with reputable instructors, putting Holosun gear to the test. They have some folks that are competitive shooters as well, that shoot quite a bit. And so that I think has helped with the growth of that brand and the perception that yes, it's a Chinese made product. I mean, there's lots of things in our world that are Chinese made.
Sure.
Of course, we're in a time now too where that's an interesting thing because tariffs are going up, and we'll see what happens with that. And of course, China is not necessarily our friend, as far as governments go.
No.
So yeah, that's it's not meant to be. Let's spend a whole episode talking about China and the geopolitical issues.
I might have done that. It might be my fault.
But it's the truth, It
is a Chinese-made product.
And it's a good product with. It just is.
Yep, they're doing a good job.
Say it is what it is.
Yep.
So I look at stuff like that and I go, American manufacturers need to catch up. In many ways, now the products that American companies are making are really good products.
Sure.
But can we do it more efficiently? Can we do it more affordably? Because I'll tell you that not a lot of people are going to have, $600 or plus to drop on an optic.
There's more to this than that, though, Riley. Here's another perspective. I don't think it's just about at what cost can we manufacture and produce the product. I think it's also a question of, you look at some of these companies that are American made products, and they have DoD contracts because DoD often almost everything the DoD buys requires that it not be made in China, that it be made in the U.S. Certainly, if there's an option to buy something that is made in the U.S. So if you're one of your primary sources of revenue as a company is to sell to the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, law enforcement, et cetera, then your pricing model is going to reflect that, because your consumer is not Jacob. Your consumer is LAPD and the Army. And so you price your products based on those opportunities, which you're going to have a higher price point by nature of where the dollars come from. So anyway, my point is simply that it's not just that American manufacturers can't make the product as efficiently and as cost efficiently, and certainly I'm sure that's a factor. But I think we also have to acknowledge that it's also about business model, and that if you're making these products in the U.S., probably it's because you want DoD agreement contracts, and so you're going to go to the market with a higher price point.
Sure, that's fair. I think that they can also probably have both business strategies as part of a,
potentially.
I mean, you see that with,
You can have Toyota and
and
Lexus.
you can have, I mean, there's examples of firearm manufacturers that, at one point catered more towards military LE contracts. That would be like Glock. But, in recent years, I feel like this is true that Glock has tried to shift more towards civilian market a little bit. Still very interested in those, especially LE contracts. Um, SIG would be a great example of a company that has appealed to both military LE contracts as well as civilian, selling directly to the public. And I think that's gone very well for them. Like they have made money hand over fist, doing exactly what they've been doing. I think there's companies that have been so focused on government contracts. I think Colt would be a good example, especially on the like AR-15 slash M16 M4 side of the house. So focused on we're making military and law enforcement carbines and sort of ignore the civilian market, sort of not even really produce anything pistol or handgun wise that the market even really wants. And then at some point you kind of see the shift where it's like, oh, this isn't really working anymore. We're not getting the contracts we once were, and having to shift and go after different market segments. So anyway, always something that's interesting to discuss, and different strategies we can pursue.
I think
So
the other brand side is just this acknowledgement that red dots are here, right? Like,
well, yeah, and that I think that's
14
the
out of
first
19 guns or 15 out of 19 or whatever it is. Like, holy crap!
I think that's the first big takeaway of the data. Like part of the reason of being here, doing this episode here today. I mean, we've said this kind of before, but and we've certainly talked about how we've seen that trend grow and grow and grow over years. I mean, just even in the conference, our Guardian conference over since the beginning, the first year to last year, definitely have seen a huge growth in the
Yeah.
number of
Yeah.
folks that show up in courses that are running optics now on their pistols.
Yeah.
And this just confirms it even further. Like it is the dominant thing, especially amongst the the people that actually train,
Yeah. People are taking
that are
classes.
going to classes,
Yeah.
that are like not just casual gun owners.
Right. They're
And
concerned
I'm
about
not
their
trying to offend
performance.
anybody here, but I suspect that there's still a lot of just, you know, Joe blows out there or whatever that are just like, don't care, or just buying whatever gun. But
Well, it's inconvenient. It's expensive. The dot itself,
Mhm.
and then I think your average consumer, if you've you've been carrying the same gun for the last 5-6 years, it's probably unlikely to be red dot ready to go.
Mhm.
So now I either got to get a new gun and or an aftermarket or updated new slide or something, or I got to get my current slide milled to allow me to mount the. So it's inconvenient and it's expensive.
Yep.
But those who care about their performance, about their ability to operate the gun effectively and efficiently, are going to move to the dot because it is easier to run the gun better, faster, awesomer.
It just presents the aiming information so much more clearly.
Yeah.
That's really what a red dot does. I'm pretty agnostic towards which sighting system. Like, is this better than this? You can debate that. Red dots are better or whatever. But I think I've proven it to myself. And it's granted, okay, maybe I'm a little bit better skilled than the average folk. Uh, you can attest to that or whatever. I don't care. Um, but you can run an iron sight gun really, really well. Red dot gun I can run really well. But which one is objectively like less brain processing power intensive? The red dot, and so that probably is the advantage. And I think that's what people are discovering, but that also comes with trade-offs, especially as they are learning the system. It's like, oh, hey, well, I point my gun, and with iron sights, if it's not quite aligned, then I can find the front sight and put it in the rear sight and get things aligned. And with the red dot, it's sometimes not quite as intuitive because you point the gun at the target. It's like, where's the dot? And then you're fishing for it. And of course, like we teach ways to hopefully solve that as efficiently as possible. That's certainly important, and it doesn't have to be that complicated either, or even really take all that much time. But it is something to be mindful of. The fact is I remember when people were saying, "Hey, red dots on pistols is a fad." That is clearly not the case.
No, that if it was a fad, it ain't no more.
Yeah. So red dots are here to stay. Lights. Lights is an interesting thing for this class.
Yeah, this one is the one probably that surprised me the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how many people running a gun with a weapon-mounted light. And part of this is, again, kind of part of that overall loadout thing. If you're running a duty holster, so like a duty type rig, then kind of probably, almost certainly, you're going to put a light on it. It's just kind of part of that overall strategy or approach or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we had a bunch of people in IWB holsters, it would have been more interesting to see. But that said, here's what we got.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right. No light. No light. Okay, sorry, my notes are a little bit hard to follow. No light. Okay, so there's a bunch of lights. Now I'm having no light. Okay, here's our first light, a weapon mounted light. I didn't write down the brand. I thought I did. Okay, okay, so one weapon mounted light here. And then here's another weapon mounted light. That's two. Here's three. Here's four. Here's five. Oh, I did write these down later. Okay, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 weapon mounted lights, and they are as follows: a TLR7, a Mod Light PLR 350.
PL 350.
Typo. Sorry, I just read what I wrote. PL 350. A TLR1, another TLR7, another TLR7, another TLR1, another TLR1, an X300, an X300, and another TLR1. So 1, 2, 3, 4 TLR1s, 2 X300s, and then 3 TLR7s, and the Mod Light.
Mm-hmm.
So in total, okay, I said 9. I think that's actually 10. Yeah, that's 10 total. So more than half, just barely. Yep. You call it basically half of these shooters are running a weapon-mounted light, and a lot of TLR1s and TLR7s, a couple X300s, and a Mod Light.
Yeah. This class surprised me. I think part of it is because this class was a little bit unique in that there was sort of like 2 core groups of attendees that,
friend group A, friend group B,
self-promote or promoted the class within their little group and kind of got a bunch of their little friends to come and participate in the class. And so there was obviously one group that very much was like, yes, duty holster with a weapon mounted light, and that was pretty much the setup. And there were some other exceptions, including folks that were running from concealment with a weapon mounted light.
Yeah, mostly still R7s. Yeah.
Right. And so but yeah, this was a little bit heavier on the weapon mounted light side. I would say that is not the typical, not maybe so much the trend. I guess the trend here is that we see a certain percentage of folks, including on the concealment side. So like Scott here, who's commenting on Facebook, he said, there's no WML on my EDC, no weapon mounted light on my EDC. There isn't on mine either. I mean, I've carried one on my EDC gun before. I don't think Jacob ever has.
Never.
But I'm not carrying one right now. I definitely have a decent defensive light in my pocket here, ready for use, and I'm familiar with using that and shooting with that. But this class had quite a few folks running WMLs.
I'll add that outside of this class, though, it is my general perception that the popularity of carrying a concealed gun with a weapon-mounted light is increasing, that it is an upward trend. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think, one, we're seeing more holster options. I think we're also seeing, the birth of these smaller, more compact lights. In a post TLR7 era.
True. That is absolutely
right,
true.
where we're no longer restricted to TLR1s and X300 size.
True.
Massive, things mounted to the gun. Now we have these lights that are not really extending the footprint of the gun in terms of width or length beyond the muzzle.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that grow in popularity. I think holster companies also seem to be, it's easier perhaps to find what you're looking for. In the podcast we recorded last week, we also talked about how we're seeing more companies rolling out lights in the Streamlight TLR7X or A or whatever you want to call it footprint. Yeah. So anyway, I do think that there's generally an increased. It is a growing trend.
Okay, yeah, I could a growing trend. Sure, I could get on
Is
board
is
with
it has
that.
it is it now the majority versus the minority? No,
Yeah,
absolutely not. I think we went to the Guardian conference where we're less likely to see duty rigs and much more likely to see concealment gear and things like that. I
mhm,
think we would not find half the people with a weapon light. We might find more like 15 to 20%. But I do think that number is growing. It's increasing.
yeah, yeah. I think you're spot on with the analysis of that technology making it possible to make those things smaller and smaller and still effective is part of the explanation for why that is more of a growing trend. And yeah, and again, from amongst all of the like different KSG Armory Revere holsters that we sell, a substantial portion of those are Glock 43X or 48s or P365s or P365X macros with the TLR7 sub lights on them.
Yes.
And so people are digging that kind of setup. It's sort of like, and here's the thing, like we can debate how useful having a weapon mounted light on a concealed carry, kind of citizen oriented personal defense gun is. But I know that some people are just like, hey, it doesn't hurt me to have that. And in a world where I can make the light small enough to be inconsequential and have a decent holster that carries it comfortably, it's sort of like, why not have it?
Yeah, so
You
that's
know,
that. I mean,
I
it
get
is a
that.
why not question,
Yeah,
and I think there are some potential why nots.
sure.
For any given individual, there, it might be resolvable. Holster selection is certainly a potential why not, but it's like, oh no, for me, for my gun, my light, there's plenty of holsters that I like. Okay, cool. Another potential why not is it is a bigger footprint to conceal. I mean, it just is. It is more stuff in my pants, and that I have to be comfortable with.
Sure.
Now, above the belt line, it doesn't impact it at all, but it can impact my comfort and my ability to conceal it the way I want to. So that's a potential
You know what my
why
counter to
not.
that would be is that with concealment holsters, we sometimes talk about, as John Hauptman at Filster termed it, the keel principle, meaning that if we have more length or just more keel below the belt line, meaning more holster and gear below the belt line, helps sometimes balance out the
But
stuff above the
longer
belt
and
line.
wider are not the same thing.
I agree with
So
that, but
my
having
yeah,
carried a full-size P320 with a TLR1 light on it,
you're 6 foot too,
I
right?
am large,
Okay.
but it concealed exceptionally well.
All my it's been a long time that I've been running appendix holsters where the holster is artificially lengthened longer than the barrel is. So right
Mhm,
now on me I have a CC9 in a Lexington, and that holster was made quote as long as it can be made.
mhm.
That's how I had our I don't make them. In case anyone was wondering, I don't know how to make these holsters.
Uh,
I watched these guys make them, but that was the instruction I gave to Sam who made this holster. I said
yep,
make it as long as you can make it. So length does not impact really my ability to conceal it. It
yeah.
only helps, but width does impact my ability to conceal it comfortably,
Conceal or just to carry it comfortably?
to carry it comfortably.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, you're correct. It doesn't really have any impact on concealment, but it
yeah.
does impact how comfortable it is below my belt.
I think when the holster is designed well, it can actually aid in concealment,
Sure,
but the comfort
but
can
comfort,
become an
it's a
issue.
potential why not.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I said. It's
yeah,
a potential.
exactly.
So for
Okay.
you, maybe it's no impact. Maybe
Yeah,
for you, you're like, no,
yeah,
it's just as comfortable for me as my non-weapon mounted light, my non-light bearing holster.
yeah.
Okay, cool. But it's a potential why not.
Yep.
And I think a
There we go.
third potential why not is cost.
Sure.
These lights are not free, and having to get an additional or different holster is also an additional cost. So if I got to drop $150 to $250 for the light, and then an additional 70 to $80 for another holster, that's a potential why not.
Sure.
So yes, I think my point is there are some potential why nots, but from a technical perspective, yeah, it's all upside if I have a light on my gun.
Yeah. Now, here's a question. You may not have necessarily tracked this, but this is more anecdotal. From that Spokane class, pistol intelligence class recently, those that were running from concealment,
Mm.
how many of them were appendix versus some other concealed carry position?
Yeah. So I did track IWB versus OWB. So count my IWBs. Here we go.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. So 6 IWBs.
Mm-hmm.
So not you've shrunken the universe from 19 shooters down to 6.
Yeah. I've had classes for sure where most of the attendees were concealment, and a few were outside waistband or something. Of those 6, how many were appendix versus not?
So I have to go off memory because I did not write that down. But
I've got the answer in my head.
Yeah,
but...
I'm thinking this one for sure was. This one for sure was appendix. This one for sure was not appendix. That one I don't remember. And that one was appendix. So I'd say of how many did I say? 6 total?
6.
So I'd say 4 for sure were appendix.
Were appendix, yeah.
1 for sure was not.
There's for sure one of the students I remember very distinctly was drawing from the hip or slightly behind the hip.
Yeah.
I don't know beyond that for certain. The point here is that we're talking here today, trends and kind of like what is today's concealed carry or landscape look like. Most people red dots on their guns. Most people carrying, in a civilian context, carrying concealed. Those that are carrying in the appendix carry position by and large. And the final thing we didn't touch on, almost forgot. And I am kind of at a point I'm supposed to be wrapping this up so I can go pick up my boys from school. But
so only 2 of our IWB people had a weapon mounted light, by the way.
Yeah.
So
one of whom was one of the smallest people.
Yes, with the full-size gun and a weapon mounted light.
That's always fascinating to me. Yeah. Real quick, what problems do we have? Malfunctions of any kind?
So we had several interesting issues with shadow systems. In fact, all 3 shadow systems that were in this class had a malfunction.
Yeah.
The first one was definitely an ammo specific thing. Swapped out the ammo, had no more issues with that gun. The other 2 I wrote down shadow systems number 2 and shadow systems number 3 both had feed issues, but they did not seem to be ammo related. You looked at them more closely than I did, so I'm not sure.
Yep.
I can't speak to it.
Completely agree. The one for sure was attributed to the ammo. The ammo was just bad ammo. We witnessed what would happen is as that round would get picked up and pushed towards the chamber, the round would get pushed back into the case. It would get set back into the case every time.
Yeah.
So it was ammo that was manufactured. It was from a large scale manufacturer too. And sometimes just bad batches go out. Just failed to have a good crimp on that so that the bullet wouldn't set back. But yeah, that's a problem when it just even on one attempt of chambering around, it gets pushed back. It's a big time problem. That was definitely ammo related. But yeah, I definitely agree that there were some feeding issues. It seemed to be feeding issues with the Shadow Systems guns, just failing to get round into chamber. Not as much like an extraction or ejection issue, but more of a feeding issue. Other malfunctions?
Yeah, so we had a couple of similar issues with the Prodigy. So the Prodigy was just not returning fully into battery, almost like the recoil spring wasn't strong enough, or it just needed more oil.
Dirty.
Yeah, like
I've seen
it
that
just was not holding
times.
up. Yeah,
I see guys that run a 2011 style gun. They get just really kind of dirty, gummed up. You got to be on top of maintenance on those things. I've seen it where the slides will cycle so like I can just watch the slide just go chunk, and that's a sign that it's time to get that thing lubricated or cleaned or something. And that's probably what was going on here with that particular gun.
Yeah, and it's unclear because he basically pulled that gun off the line and came back with a different gun. So we don't know what would have been necessary to resolve it. And the last one was a VP9. And that was mine. It was a mag issue. It was an aftermarket mag.
That was what I believe is that I overstuffed that. So that's a competition magazine that default I can put 22 rounds in. I think I I can squeeze 23 rounds in those mags. I think I stuck 23 rounds in that mag. Yeah. And so I know that. I think just in the process loading for, between relays of the class, I just overstuffed that mag. So as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, yeah, I overstuffed that mag.
Yeah.
They have not given me issues as long as I don't put more than 22 rounds in those particular competition mags. So
yeah, so not a gun failure really.
I didn't. No,
it's a user-induced mag failure.
Yeah, I know that I shouldn't put. I think there's part of it is I'm still narrowing down which mags I can get away with it. There's certain mags, so like I got they're labeled and so like I gotta do further testing. Be like, yeah, that mag I can put 23 rounds in and it's not too tight to chamber around, but. So yeah, that was definitely one of the other failures. Anything else?
That was it on the malfunction side. Yeah.
So what was interesting about this class is that almost every class I see a failure or two of optics. I don't recall any optics failing in this class, which was pretty impressive.
No, we might have seen a battery get changed here or there,
Maybe.
but I don't remember any failures. And just broadly speaking, like it's interesting to me. We had what I say 9 Glocks on the line. We didn't see any Glock failures. That to me, that's unusual. Like 2 M&Ps, but neither of them failed. Like we had perhaps a higher echelon of consumer who probably was going home, cleaning guns, oiling guns at night before day 2. Because I just think on day 2, you start to see some failures across the board.
Yep.
And I don't think that there's manufacturers that are immune from that. But we just didn't see them this time.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot less
Glocks
issues.
are still very reliable guns.
Sure.
But are they infallible like some people would have you believe? No. We've certainly proven that and seen that happen. The most common failures I see with optics, just for those that care to know, that I see, and I'm speaking broadly of over all the classes I've taught and events I've attended and taught at. It is either batteries that die.
Sure.
So people aren't changing their batteries often enough, or the optic itself or plate it's mounted to, or something to that effect. It's a mounting error where it comes loose, which is almost always a failure to install it properly.
Sure.
Okay, following the right procedures to do that. And so didn't see any of that this time. So that was really cool to see. That's good. That's positive. That's a big thing. Make sure your red dots are installed correctly and that you're changing batteries frequently enough. Whatever schedule you need to be on. Some optics you can change once a year. Some got to be every 6 months. Some got to be every 3 months. Okay. And it doesn't hurt to change them more frequently than that. I mean, whatever you can afford battery wise. I buy Duracell batteries on Amazon in like bulk packs that are pretty affordable. And then I just got a bunch and I swap them out pretty religiously. So if you're doing that, chances are I just don't see that much in the way of optic failures anymore. It's rare that I've had an optic just die, like where it just stops working. It happens, but it is the most common things is usually someone's like, my dot stopped working. It's like, we'll go swap the battery. They swap the battery and they're back up. And so like that explains like 9 out of 10 of those types of failures.
Sure. I mean, I've had a dot fail. You've seen dots fail.
Mhm.
It's just like you said. It's not the common. The common issue is battery's dead or you didn't mount this properly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. We didn't handle those issues this time, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it won't be the issue next time. And so hopefully you've got some information today that'll be helpful to you in the future, attending maybe your next class or whatever. So with that, we got to start wrapping it up here. Today's episode, again, sponsored by the online pistol intelligence class, which you can find at concealedcarry.com/PIQ course. And our other sponsor of today's episode is the KSG Armory Revere holster, available at ksgarmory.com/Revere. We'll let people go. Any final words?
Nope. I think that's it. We appreciate your business. So next time you're shopping for something, check it out at concealedcarry.com.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. Until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true.